Well, growing up here in Opa-locka, born and raised here, I remember as a small child, it's ironic that we're doing this on a Saturday because some of my most fondest memories of Opa-locka are Saturday mornings. Grew up here, one of 5 siblings. My mom and dad were married very young, 20 and 18, and bought a house right over here on Sherrar, 1226 Sherrar Avenue. And we lived there. In fact, I stayed in the home and took over the home all the way into my adult years. But I just remember growing up in Opa-locka. Of course, it was a much different time back then. And I remember growing up, and during the week we had school. We attended Opa-locka Elementary, which is now Robert Ingram. We were very close, so we were able to walk to school back and forth. I was a safety patrol officer in 3rd grade, and we had some wonderful teachers. Mrs. Fortner, my kindergarten teacher, Ms. Chastain, Ms. Berwick, Mrs. Mertz, Mr. Amick, great teachers. Had a lot of friends. The school was very integrated. I had a lot of white, black, and Hispanic friends, and we all played together and got along and had a great time. I can remember Saturday mornings getting up, and of course we would go out and ride our bikes. One of the things that we always liked to do is there was a pool. We called it the Opa-locka pool, but it was actually called North Regional. And for 15 cents we'd go in there and we'd go into the pool. They offered swimming lessons there, which was a good thing because I needed them. And we would go there and spend the whole day swimming and then come back and just ride our bikes and play around. We had 2 large mango trees in our backyard, so we were always climbing trees. And yes, I did eventually fall out and break my arm. But it was neat because my cousins lived right next door to me, Billy and Tommy. My grandfather, who was the founder, owner, and original proprietor of the Opa-locka Drug Store, Arthur Copello, they lived on the next block. We were 1226 Sherrar, he was 1226 Dunad. And so we could literally walk over to my grandfather's house. And that's another great memory I have is Saturday mornings. He had a green thumb, and he had some of the most beautiful rose bushes, and his entire front of his house was a giant gardenia bush. And whenever I smell gardenias, the first thing I think of is number 1, Opa-locka, number 2, my grandfather, and growing up here as a kid. And so it was a lot of fun. After playing all day and going to the pool and hanging out, we had a real treat. There was a gentleman, his name was Tony. He was our ice cream man locally here in Opa-locka. And he was an Italian guy. We love those Italians. And he would come down the road. Now, his ice cream truck was not a traditional van ice cream truck. It was a pickup truck with a modified body on the back. And he would come down, and he had little bells on his visor. And he would ring the bell and say, "Here come Tony, here come Tony." And we would all run out there with our change. And the first thing this man would do, anybody that grew up in Opa-locka knows this to be true, he'd put on the brakes of that truck. He'd jump out of the truck and he'd go, "No, no, babies." He'd call us all babies. We were all babies to him, no matter what our ages were. "No, no, babies, don't come out to the street. Wait for Tony, wait for Tony." And he'd come out there and he would just take his time with each of us and get us the ice cream. And if there was a particular one we wanted, he would search his ice cream chest until he found that. He would not give up. Had his little change thing there, and he'd make our change and make sure that we got our correct monies back. But he was to me, he was an Opa-locka icon, because everybody that grew up as a kid during those days knows Tony, the ice cream man. And so it was a lot of fun. So the pool, the school, Tony the ice cream man, there was just so many things. On our way to the pool, there was a store called Quickie. And we would stop in there and get little Pee-wee sodas, orange, grape, or lime sodas, and a black cow, which was chocolate taffy on a stick. And that was our treat on the way to the pool. And then we'd go there and come back, and we'd have our ice cream later on. We actually did eat regular food. We didn't eat just treats. But those are some of the things that really stick out as a memory. And You know, a lot of places here in downtown Opa-locka, the Five and Dime store was a place we frequented quite a bit. There was a 7-Eleven. There was a couple of supermarkets, the Grand Union, as well as a supermarket called Glendale Supermarket. Glendale was located right next door to where we're at right now. And Grand Union is the Spanish supermarket, which is still there today. And if you go into that Spanish supermarket that used to be the Grand Union, they still have the same checkout transition desks. Those are the same ones that were there when I was a kid. And even some of the linoleum tiles that are in that supermarket are original, at least as far back as the early 70s. So it was a pretty cool place. And of course, City Hall. You know, City Hall was like nobody else had a City Hall like we did. Well, my father came down as a small boy. My grandmother and grandfather came down when he was just a small boy here. And they actually came down for health reasons because the Florida climate was good for emphysema and any kind of breathing conditions. And my grandfather had that on my mom's side. So that's how she originally wound up down here in South Florida. And then on my dad's side, they came down here as well because of the better economical opportunity here in South Florida, to which is, like I said, my grandfather opened the Opa-locka Drug, and they settled right there. I think a big reason, the reason they settled on Sherrar Avenue where they did, is I think my grandfather, my Grandpa Copello, and my grandmother kind of had a thing for that because they wanted to have them close by, so they helped them get their first house here in Opa-locka. And let's face it, Opa-locka was a novelty city. It was a unique city. I know they say Miami is the magic city, but we have a Arabian Nights festival. We have Aladdin's Magic Lamp. We have the Magic Carpet Ride. In fact, there was a song by Steppenwolf called The Magic Carpet Ride, and that was our theme song as kids because we lived in Opa-locka, so we actually lived that song. So Opa-locka was a city of dreams, of imagination, and it was unique like nobody else had. So we kind of bragged a little bit that we actually lived in the city of Opa-locka. My favorite part about living here, again, Saturday mornings. You know, you wake up Saturday morning, oh, no school, you know, but you didn't want to sleep in because you wanted to get up and get out. My favorite part about living in Opa-locka was the sense of community. Everybody got along, everybody helped out. It didn't matter the color of your skin, it didn't matter what ethnic background you came from. Everybody watched out for everyone, everybody played together. I just remember getting up and playing out in the street, climbing trees. It was just a very relaxed, safe, tight-knit community where everyone looked out for one another. We were fortunate to live on a block where it had a lot of business owners. Mr. Bundy, who owned the Bundy Auto Paint and Body Shop. Mr. Welch, which I believe is in one of your photos in the tower of City Hall. He owned the Opa-locka Hardware right across the street here. Ken Willauer was with Willauer Jewelers, which originally was here on Opa-locka Boulevard, and then he moved over to 27th Avenue in the 70s. And Mr. Crenshaw with USA Battery. These are businessmen that actually lived on the 1200 block of Sherrar. So we had a nice block, good neighbors, very tight-knit community that watched out for us. And we felt very special that we had those opportunities, and just getting out on Saturday morning and just exploring. We actually had a spy club. We called it the Nighthawks. And our fort was a little man cave that my Grandpa Copello had behind his house. It was a little shed with a bathroom and a spare room. He kind of had his little separate man quarters that he would go out and study and read. Well, we used that for our fort, and we would go out at night on the weekends and spy on people. Of course, if you did that today, you'd probably get in a little bit of trouble. But that was some of the activity that we enjoy. And I actually had a code name. My name was Messenger 10. That was my code name. But that was the simplicity. That was the great thing about growing up in Opa-locka, is you didn't really have to have a lot of attractions, even though we did have quite a few attractions. You can really just, the city was the fun. being here, the community was the excitement and the adventure. Oh, sure. My grandfather, Arthur Copello, like I said, was the original founder, owner, proprietor of Opa-locka Drug, and it was located right next door here, just over to the side. And basically what that was is it was a drugstore, and it also had a diner, an old-fashioned fountain, if you will. And my grandfather was the pharmacist, and my grandmother ran the diner. Interesting enough, there was a woman named Williams that worked for my grandmother, and so when my grandfather and grandmother sold the pharmacy and the diner, Ann, who worked for my grandmother, asked if she would sell the diner to her when they moved it across the street, and it became Tartax's Opa-locka Drug. Full circle, Ann worked for my grandmother, and years later, my older brother Michael and I would work for Ann in the same diner as dishwashers. And so it was a place where my grandmother, because there was the Marine base here at the Opa-locka Airport, she would have parties at their house on Dunad, and she would welcome the troops when they had leave, like an evening leave or a weekend leave. They would come over and she would serve them drinks and hors d'oeuvres, and they would just kind of have a big party, and they would just entertain these soldiers, these men, these military men and women over at their home, kind of as an outreach to them. And of course, they took care of a lot of their medical prescriptions at the Opa-locka Drug Store. Well, you know, as I was born in '63, so by that time the military base had moved out. But I do remember my grandmother entertaining them, and I also know that even still today, if you go over to the Opa-locka Executive Airport, there are still small bunkers with the grass grown over them that they used back during the war days. The Coast Guard station is still there, and back then they also housed the Goodyear blimp at North Regional. There was a huge hangar. They actually blew that up during the filming of the Bad Boys movie in the early '90s with Will Smith and Martin Lawrence, correct. And so that got destroyed for the making of the movie, but the Goodyear blimp used to be housed there at the Opa-locka Airport, and that was another attraction that we had that we would actually go. And let me tell you something, when I say people go, when that blimp would come to land, there wasn't a formal announcement. People would just drive out there. I remember being put on the shoulders of one of my dad's friends, watching them guide that blimp in and landing it at night, with all the lights and signs, and they would program it, and it was really, really a spectacle to see. And so we would see that come over our house. We'd see planes come over our house, Coast Guard helicopters and planes going over our house. So for us, the blimp, the Coast Guard station, those are things I remember. As far as the military, when they were here before my time, there was houses on the airport. There was a small winding semi-paved road, and those were the houses of the elite officers, colonels, generals, captains, old houses, but very nice houses. They lived actually on the base. And then what they called back then the villas. These are those stretch of houses that are right over here on Alibaba going down. Later, they would be termed as the projects because they were people that didn't have a lot of money would live there, a very small, almost like apartment homes. But those used to barracks the troops here on the base. And even my uncle, who was also in the military, who fought in Vietnam, my uncle Art Mattingly, they lived over in some of those barracks houses with their families. And so if you were an officer, you had your own house. But if you were a soldier, you lived in what we termed the villas in those barracks right there. Well, of course, the Opa-locka skating rink, which was Alibaba and just a little bit east of Northwest 27th Avenue. We would go to the Opa-locka skating rink. They had the little racetrack where we go the go-kart track back in the day, right over here where the old flea market used to be. Of course, I had mentioned about the Five and Dime and the 7-Eleven and the pool and the different things like that. There were several things that we were able to do. And because Hialeah was in such close proximity to Opa-locka, there were a lot of horse ranches out there. So there was a lot of horseback riding going on. Before Amelia Park that was all pasture. We used to ride horses all in through there. And it was really, really a neat time. And of course, restaurants. You had the old Scandinavian restaurant, which was a smorgasbord. Oh my goodness, we used to love going there because you'd pay one price and you would just absolutely pig out. We had great pizza places. Connie and Dottie, the owners of Opa-locka Pizza, which is just a couple of doors down, had the best pizza and the best meatball sandwiches you'd ever want to have. And they were just sweet people, a small operation, but they turned out such a great business. And that was a fixture. Everybody that lived in Opa-locka knew Opa-locka Pizza. And the places to eat, the places to go, you could always find something good to eat. You could always find something to do. This was not a boring place to be. Well, it's a really neat story, and hold on to your hats, because my mother and father divorced when we were very young kids. My father, unfortunately, was a heavy drinker, a heavy alcoholic, and so my mom said, "Look, you're not gonna drink your paycheck." She basically kicked him out and said, "We're gonna go it alone. Me and the 5 kids, we're just gonna take care of business." That was at the house at 1226 Sherrar. So my mom, basically single mom raising 5 kids, and she would tell us the story. She'd sit us down and she'd say, "Listen, when you were born, your father was a refrigerator repairman. When you were born, your father was a mechanic. When you were born, your father was a milkman. When you were born, your father was an insurance agent. And when your little brother Johnny was born, he was a telephone repairman." And we looked at our mom, we go, "Mom, we thought Dad was our dad. Who were all these other men?" She goes, "Exactly. When you were born, your father was a refrigerator repairman. When you were born, he was an insurance." So then we got the joke that he worked all these several jobs. Well, he got into heavy drinking, became an alcoholic. She kicked him out and he left, and she raised us 5 kids. Of course, everybody grew up, went away to college, got married, did all of those things. But I retained the house. I was away at college. My mom and my little brother were living in the house on their own. I dropped out of college to come back and help them out financially. And so my brother graduated, went to pharmacy school like my grandfather, became a pharmacist, moved out. My mom remarried, and she moved out, so I went ahead and kept the house. The original house that we grew up in, I kept it, I fixed it up. Now here's the neat thing. Years later, my father would finally come to Christ. He would be saved, he'd turn his life around, he would find faith, and he would join Alcoholics Anonymous. And for the last 10 years of my father's life, he was dry, didn't touch a drop of alcohol. He actually became, again, the father that we once knew, because before the drinking, he was an excellent father, a great man. And as fate would have it, he needed a place to stay. So where did my father stay? He came back to live with me in the same house that we threw him out of. He came back to live in that house. We threw him out in 1976. He came back to live in that house in 1994. And the last 4 years of my father's life, that's where he lived, was in that house. Before my father passed away, he was going in to have a simple procedure, and he kept saying, "If something happens to me, I want to remarry your mom on paper." I said, "Dad, Mom's never going to remarry you. You know, she's already married you. She married this other guy. She's already divorced. She's done with marriage. She's not going to do it." He goes, "Yes, but I want her to get my benefits, my pension, and all the things I worked for." I said, "Dad, nothing's going to happen to you, and Mom's not interested." Sure enough, he goes into the hospital. He has this simple procedure. I've got the welcome home banners home at the house ready for him to come home, and my father suffers a heart attack and passes away in the hospital, very unexpectedly. We were devastated. We're making all the arrangements. I'm getting everything taken together, getting ready to do his eulogy. I send my little brother and my mom to the Social Security Administration office to say, hey, go there and close out all of Dad's stuff for me. While there, the lady goes, Mrs. Conn, where do you want the benefits sent to? My mom goes, you understand, we were divorced over 10 years ago. I'm not entitled to those benefits. Mrs. Conn, we have the paperwork here, but it was never filed. You and your husband were never divorced. Therefore, you get all of his benefits. Everything that my father wanted, unbeknownst to him, was already done. And I tell that story, you say, well, what does that have to do with the history of Opa-locka? It happened in Opa-locka. Opa-locka, if that happened anywhere else, it would just be a story. But because it happened in Opa-locka, it's unique, just like the city of Opa-locka is unique. Just like the city of Opa-locka, you don't find any other place in South Florida that is magical and has the imagination that the city of Opa-locka brings, and still to this day, it brings that. Well, you know, I was looking to move out of Opa-locka even prior to my father's death. You know, he was going to retire. He was building a cabin in the mountains, and I was looking to get into something new. On my block, the house, it was a good house. I'd put a lot of money into it, fixing it up, but I just got so tired of repairing. Every time I'd fix something, 2 more things would go wrong. And so I just wanted something new. It was certainly not because of my block. I had a wonderful, wonderful block. And just to give you kind of a progressive history, when I grew up in Opa-locka on that block, there was not a single black or Hispanic family on our block. It was 100% white Caucasians just like us. It wasn't because people weren't welcome. It was just, that's just how it was. There was just different areas of the city. When I got ready to move and sell my home in 1998, I was the lone white Caucasian on the block. And by the way, that was not a negative thing whatsoever. It was a great thing, because I can remember coming home after work in my dress shirt, my dress pants, my dress shoes, and you had all these kids out on the street playing tag football and everything. I could not get into my driveway fast enough where they would come up and say, Mr. Conn, because I told them they have to call me Mr. Conn, because as an adult, you have to show respect. You can't call me Mark. They would ask me my first name. I say, it's Mr. That's my first name. And my last name is Conn. So they understood that and they respected it. Great kids. I would put my briefcase down and I would go out and I'd play all-time quarterback, both sides. And I would stay out there and get all sweaty in my dress clothes. But it was great because they wanted to play with Mr. Conn. I loved it. In my backyard, I built a basketball court, and they would play in my backyard on the basketball court even when I was not home. They just had to make sure they didn't leave any trash, and they had to close the fence when they were done. My house was a welcome house. I had a Rottweiler dog, a watchdog, and I had some of my neighbors that had keys to my home that would check on my home and walk my dog if I was late at work. That was the thing that they did for me. So I had a wonderful block of neighbors on my house. There was one such young man, his name was Louis, Spanish family, lived across the street. He had this old ratchety bike, and when my father lived there with me, I saw that bike. I said, Dad, we need to do something with that poor kid's bike. He's 8 years old. He's got that nasty bike. Let's see if we can fix it up. My father looked at me and said, let's just buy him a new bike and say we fixed up his old one. I said, okay. We went to Lionel Play World, picked out a bike, nice motocross bike, took it over to Lewis's house, knocked on his door. He comes out and he goes, wow, this is fresh. Look at this bike. You painted it, you fixed it up. And all of a sudden he realized that's not his bike. It's a brand new bike. And my father, who lived on Social Security, didn't have a lot, he said, I want to split this with you. I want to pay half of this bike for this young man. And my dad was not a warm, fuzzy lover of small kids and things. He had his kids, he was done. But he really just, his heart was just so touched by this little kid, this little neighbor. And so we bought that bike. That kid engulfed us. He almost knocked us down. He was so happy, hugging us. But here's the thing, again, that's the sense of community. And even though the community changed, it was still the same for us. We still had a tight-knit community there watching out. So when I left Opa-locka, it wasn't because of the neighborhood. It wasn't because of the city. The only reason that I really left Opa-locka is the value of the homes was going down, and I wanted something new, as something I could, really invest into. I dare say when I sold my house and I left Opa-locka, it was shortly after my father passed away. My house basically sold in weeks after my father passed, just ironically, coincidentally. And when I left, little Lewis cried his eyes out. Many of the other kids, the families, they all came over to wish me well. I had a big yard sale. I sold all the stuff in the house. They all came over and snatched it up. And it was really tough to leave. I was excited to do something new and get a new house, but I was also sad to leave an area that I had been there for 35 years. I never knew another home. But even though I left, I would make it a point to come back to the block and say hello to everyone, and even take some of those same kids and families over to my new house in Pembroke Pines and entertain them over there. And so leaving Opa-locka was a financial decision because basically I still love the town. I think there was a lot of people that just weren't taking care of their properties, for a variety of reasons. People moving in and out. Some of the old standbys that had lived in Opa-locka were no longer there. And I think it was really just a cultural change. The people that lived there before, their yards were manicured, everything was there. And then other people moved in, not necessarily other ethnicities or races, but just other people that moved in and said, it's an old house, it doesn't need the care that it needs. And they just didn't take care of their properties like the original previous owners did. And so I think it went down. Also, the crime rate in Opa-locka really soared during that time, unfortunately. Again, even though that was the case, my house was never affected. Our block was never affected by the crime rate. We were always leery of it. We were careful because you don't want to be foolish. But at the same time, the crime rate, the value going down, and I think attributed to some of the value going down was the increase in crime rate. Well, there happened to be a lot of corruption in government that was going on here too. Interfighting with commissioners and mayors, different things that took place. There was one such instance back in the late 70s that there was a commissioner they had just had a commission meeting, and it was a very heated commission meeting, a lot of enemies going on. As he was leaving City Hall, Opa-locka City Hall, somebody ran him down in a car. He was killed, and it turned out that the person that ran him down was one of the owners of the Navarro Pizza that lived on Alibaba, and she was found to have been intoxicated. There was conspiracy theories thinking, well, was that intentional or was that accidental? And so there was conspiracies like that going around that it was a hit. There was a lot of corruption with money and things being misappropriated or not getting where they needed to go. City Hall became just a shambles. 7-Eleven moved out. Grand Union moved out. All of the businesses, first of all, you had a lot of people retiring and no longer alive. And so those businesses were never replenished. And with all of the corruption going on in government and then the crime raising up, even corruption within the police force, unfortunately, with different chiefs and things like that, I think that all attributed to the dark cloud that hung over Opa-locka at that time. Well, my vision of Opa-locka as a kid was like Mayberry RFD. It was just a nice little hometown. Opa-locka has expanded, land and gone all over. The Opa-locka that I know is this nice little circle surrounding City Hall, and from west of 27th Avenue and east of like about 32nd Avenue, and then, in between Oriental Boulevard, 151st, and Opa-locka Boulevard, that's Opa-locka. And I would love to see Opa-locka go back to its roots, but yet in a better way, where you would go back and restore some of those businesses and restore some of those iconic places, a little drugstore, a little hardware store, a little five and dime store, 7-Eleven type, even a small supermarket. These type things where the people of Opa-locka could enjoy some of those amenities, bring back some of those attractions, but by the same token, you know, we're now in 2024, 25. They're coming up on the 100th anniversary of the city of Opa-locka in 1926. I would love to see people that have moved out of Opa-locka and have badmouthed it. And listen, I had a negative view of Opa-locka for a long time too. It's like, man, I got out of there just in time, because after I got out, I left for financial reasons, but after I left, I'm thinking, I don't know if I'd ever want to go back there. It's changed. I'd love to see some of those things come back and Opa-locka get beyond all of that terrible reputation and say, hey, look, this is the Opa-locka that Glenn Curtis intended. This is the Opa-locka that we want to have. The vision that was made and the vision that continues. We're still here, so that vision should still be here.